Hello, fellow people! Today we continue and going through the episodes and all of the events that surround them now. But who the fuck cares about that? Most of the script is me ranting about the 3 professors that don't have faces or personalities in canon yet, and thus I designed them and their classes. And even while writing this, I can tell if this video will end up 14 minutes or 40, because on one hand I'm a yapper and there's a lot of planned for this episode, but on the other I talk fast and can never tell how long the final recording will end up after I edit it. So it most likely will end up being split into parts, but don't worry, I'll post them closely one after another. So let's not drag this out too much, it's not healthy for watch time analytics. Professors! We only know a few, and what we do know is very limited, making it seem like Beacon is just a background decoration instead of functioning institution that existed long before our characters have been born. And for that, we need to add more. And to shush the stupid bitches that will start crying their favorite too many characters, I'ma say it right away. Honey bun, basics of writing is making every minor character push the pillars of storytelling in some way. No, just removing them entirely doesn't work, because then we're left with a void. And do we really need more voids when Beacon is already barely existent as an actual place? What we do instead, as competent storytellers, which you clearly aren't if you don't understand the purpose of minor characters, is we use them to showcase personalities, dynamics, relationships between our main characters. And before you start crying, RWBY bad at writing. Nope. This is exactly what we have with Port and Oobleck, the only established teachers we have. Port not only pointing out Vice's flaws, but also pushing her to start changing with good advice, and later encouraging Yen to give herself a chance to start fighting again and not be stuck in fear. Oobleck on making Jean think of his incompetence, which leads to snap at Pyrrha and then jump kick the entire start of his personal growth, and later by making Ruby girls think on their roles as huntresses, and why they're doing it, which was still on their minds volumes later, finally getting a resolution in volume 9, with them finally understanding who they are and what they're fighting for. Well, mostly. This is what minor characters are for, and why they're important to the story and the main characters. Let's look at the 3 teachers we do know, then we'll talk about the hypothetical episode plot, and next time we'll design the new teachers I'm so excited to rant about. During this portion, I'll be showing one teacher at a time, skipping to the start of another speed paint to make the narration match the image. Don't worry, when we get to narrative portion, I'll come back to the missed parts and let them play out. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not exactly used to drawing more wider characters. The body I gave Nora was kinda the most I've ever done. Well, you never learn if you never try. So here we have Port, short and fat compared to Oobleck's tall and twig-like, the classic dynamic. It's interesting to track down all the other differences. Port's well-tailored suit and carefully groomed mustache and hair. And then there's the mess of sleep deprivation that is Oobleck. They're so different, but they have something in common that makes them great friends despite the clear age difference. Passion for their subjects. They both remind me of teachers I had in school. One taught home ec, the other history, and both loved to talk, which we little shits that didn't want to do anything in class would use to our full advantage. The home ec teacher was a lot like Port. She would tell stories about her life for hours, sometimes the same stories over and over. You just needed to ask her about something and there she went. Some of the stories had actual useful life advice, and then there were some that I don't know why she decided they were good to tell, like the one about a girl that got broken up with on a field trip, got drunk and tried to drown herself? Told to a bunch of 12-year-olds? Would recommend! The history teacher is what I feel Oobleck would be like if we got to see more of his class. She was very old, and thus had a lot of personal experience to share when it comes to history. When we didn't feel like learning about some European monarchy again, the best students in class usually prepared the grounds for the art distraction, discussing the topic at hand using historical examples, starting a debate about her subject with her, and either continued the debate the whole lesson or shifted the topic to her personal experience, where the rest of the class could also chime in and ask more, distracting her further into just talking about how life actually was 60-70 years ago. Oobleck obviously wouldn't have life experience, man is like in his 30s, but he's extremely passionate about history and would be able to rant about any subject as if he was actually present for it. Maybe that's how and or why Oz hired him, someone the king could talk to about the war without anyone being suspicious why he's talking about it as if he was actually there. And Oobleck wouldn't suspect a thing either, thinking Oz is really into history too. The thought that he's actually lived through all of it never crossed in his mind. Oh, side note, speaking of timings and ages, we know when Stark first got into Beacon, Porst was still just a teacher's assistant. That was, by my timeline, about 22 years ago. Interesting, and does make a lot of sense actually. When drawing Port's suit, I noticed that in different mediums it closes on different sides. Maybe he has several suits with different closures for fun. I have no clue what the hell Oobleck has on his arms and why, so it's now removed. It looks stupid and unnecessary. Of course, this man is chaotic and allegedly drinks rocket fuel, but come on. Instead, I'm gonna make a reference to that weird thing and change it to something that actually makes sense. He has a hair tie on his wrist, so he can make a little ponytail if he needs to. Maybe so Glinda would stop dragging his ass for not looking presentable. Also, apparently his eyes are brown. Now we'll also take a look at anime-exclusive Shion Zaiden that I'm drawing to fill up speed paint time while I'm telling the story. I'm gonna be honest, I kinda forgot about Shion, oops. Maybe because they're directly connected to the part of Ice Queendom I pretend doesn't exist. Their design gave me trouble, mostly in the fucking head department. As I said with Roman, I do not draw heads, can't and won't, unless I need to. It took me several tries to get their face right in my style, getting the right level of androgynous. Which, yay, non-binary representation. And of course, the hair struggle. Fluffy and weirdly shaped. Eddie, save me. Oh, and also I made their skin have actual color. They're still a fucking vampire, but at least it's not pure fucking #FFF white. Bro, next to Shion's outfit, Osmin looks even more like an overdressed fancy dweeb, which I guess fits with their eccentric vibe. Speaking of, isn't it weird that they specialize in Grimm, but it's Port who's teaching Grimm studies? Here's a thought to make it make sense. They do teach Grimm studies, but only in higher grades, when they learn about more rare and dangerous types of Grimm. That would be your apathy, chill, Nekalavi, Siphelon, all the nasties that are rare to find and hard to get away from alive. Shion is an active huntsman that specializes on these types of Grimm, and has to go on missions all the time. So they only hold lessons once in a while between missions. Since they only teach about rare Grimm, it's not a bother. Meanwhile, Port handles teaching about more common species. Also, while we're streamlining everything about the whole anime-only mess, I'm changing their semblance too. Now Shion's semblance is simple and classy lucid dreaming. They can connect dreams of people and allow them to freely move in there. Not like we'll need that because none of that shit exists in my reboot, but hypothetically this is how it would work. We start a hypothetical episode 3 the same way we do chapter 9. Vice waking up, relishing that today they're starting a bit later, still a bit sore after initiation, only to be met with a whistle right in her ear which makes her fall out of bed. Dragged back to the cruel reality of that annoying creature being her team leader. Winter would be so disappointed. Well, she did agree to unpack the first thing in the morning, so might as well get it done with. They managed to handle it relatively quickly, and then just as relatively quickly handled the bad issue. Vice personally made sure to check the floating contraption Ruby's claimed as her bond for stability, threatening Ruby that she will kill her if the thing falls on her. She's also surprised Blake agreed to sleep under the horrific book held situation they have on their side of the room. She thought Blake was more reasonable than that. Though who is she kidding? After agreeing to this whole idea, all of them are crazy. She should have guessed none of them paid attention to time. It would be so embarrassing to be late on their first day. If only she'd been the leader, she would have made sure to put up alarms. They and Juniper run as fast as they can to the assembly in the amphitheater, barely making it just in time for Professor Osmond's speech to first years.
I'll keep this brief. You have traveled here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills. And when you have finished, you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people. But I look amongst you, and all I see is wasted energy, in need of purpose, direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step.
And with that short message, he's done. All that stress for just a couple of vague words and not even encouragement? But she has to agree with Yanni and Ruby. He did seem off, as if he wasn't even there. But there's no time to think on the things that don't concern them. They should focus instead on papers Professor Goodwitch is handing out to each of the new teams, timetables and classes. Vice immediately reads through all of them, not trusting Ruby with getting them to the right places at the right time. Thankfully, Glinda guides them to the first class on Grimm Studies, the only class for today, so students could get familiar with the campus later. Vice would have to take advantage of that, get familiar with the layout to not get lost like a dolt. But for now, class. Which feels more like a joke. Are they really going to learn anything like this, with the professor spending more time telling stories and cracking and funny jokes instead of telling them about the Grimm like he's supposed to? And with her annoying teammates joking around instead of paying attention? Granted, not like there's much to pay attention to, but they could at least pretend out of respect to their instructors. Especially Ruby, who's supposed to set an example for the team, yet she's acting like a child. How is she supposed to work with that? Vice jumps at the first opportunity to show herself, show how a proper student, a proper huntress should act. One tiny Borba task is nothing compared to what she trained against with Winter. If only she could concentrate without all these annoying distractions breaking her focus. Why must Ruby yell every time she's getting ready to strike? as if trying to make her fail on purpose. So frustrating. At least she managed to finish the job successfully even with the nuisance. Doesn't mean she has to tolerate it. Class is dismissed, so Weiss wants to make good on her plans to work around the school grounds. And she almost manages to get to it. Almost. Ruby catches up to her, insisting they spend the day as a team for some reason. Is she actually 12? Do they have to walk around all together everywhere? She has her own plans, thank you very much. And even if they're supposed to always be together, where's Yan in that case? Ruby whips her head around looking for Yan in the crowd, mumbling that she was just there. Weiss tries to use that moment to leave, but Ruby tries to grab her sleeve and accidentally makes Mertenaster drop from the cloche on her belt. Weiss is this close to strangling her, but that would be unbecoming of her, so she takes a deep breath and sits down to pick it up, only to have Ruby get in her way again, scrambling and grabbing it, releasing the dust cartridges and making herself sneeze, triggering an explosion. Now Weiss can stop herself from screaming, demanding Ruby at least read a brochure on how to work with dust before touching anything and leave her alone. She storms off, grabbing Mertenaster and pushing past Blake, who was just awkwardly standing there the whole time, and John, who came to check the explosion. They can deal with Ruby, and she needs to take a walk to clear her head. Meanwhile, Jean helps Ruby up. She's so embarrassed about all that and doesn't get what the hell is Weiss's problem. Is she still mad about the whistle? Yang said it would be funny. And yeah, she would be mad too if someone dropped Kirsten throws, but she tried to help, it was an accident. And no, it doesn't warrant an embarrassing nickname, shut up, Jean. Why is everything going wrong? And now Blake left too without saying a word, wonderful. And people are staring, making her anxiety flare up. Welcome to Beacon. She keeps ranting while walking with Jean, neither watching where they're going exactly, which of course gets them lost. So they have a new embarrassing challenge, the bane of existence of all introverts in front of them. Asking strangers for directions. It takes them a couple of rounds of rock, paper, scissors to decide on who's gonna ask. Jean lost, so he nervously approaches a group of older students, Ruby hiding behind him. He awkwardly stands there waiting for the girl in shades to finish talking to her friends before asking her, which she keeps going, not noticing them, or noticing but ignoring, which would be even worse. Finally, a girl with rabbit ears, noticing them they're standing there, and kindly asks if they need anything. That catches attention of the others, and they turn to look at them. Well, 2 out of 3, red-haired guy just stays as is. The other girl takes a look at them over her shades and bluntly asks, "Aren't you the guy who threw up on the ship?" "Coco, that's not nice to say!" Jean turns bright red and regrets everything. Ruby decides to bite the bullet instead and asks for directions, cutting off any potential jokes coming up, or them realizing she's the source of the explosion in the courtyard. Coco points them to where the dorms are, and the redhead suddenly pats Jean on the back. Don't worry about that incident so much. Coco is just hoping that yours would overshadow the time she had the same thing happen to her after a party last year, right on Good Witch's blouse. Fox, shut up! And with that, Ruby and Jean, trying not to laugh, leave Team Coffee to figure out if they decided to pretend that never happened or what. Meanwhile, Weiss is walking around the school grounds, trying to remember past to all the important places and visiting where the future classes would be. To be prepared, to be the best in the class, to uphold the family name as she should. So why wasn't she made a leader? It's so unfair. Is it nepotism? Or just some weird random decision on Osman's part, see how it goes? She wouldn't put it past him, he's old enough to do that. God damn it, did her thoughts accidentally summon Ruby? Did she follow her? Can't she just have the evening to herself? Ruby says she got lost and that John left with his team, who they ran into on the way to the dorms. Why couldn't she have went with them? Weiss sharply comments on Ruby unsurprisingly getting lost, of course she did. That is just so like her, incompetent at everything and a nuisance to those who do know what they're doing. Ruby asks where is this coming from, clearly hurt. But Weiss doesn't care. She just tells her everything that's been brewing on her mind the whole day. That she doesn't deserve to be a leader, that Osman made a mistake, and storms off again, hoping this time Ruby won't follow her. Ruby is left to dwell on what Weiss said, wondering what she did to trigger that reaction, only to have Osman himself come out from behind the corner. Well, they are close to the tower, no wonder he would be here. But might as well ask, why did he make her into a leader? Did he make a mistake?
Now that didn't seem to go very well.
Is she right? Did you make a mistake?
That remains to be seen.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's only been one day. Ruby, I've made more mistakes than any man, woman, and child on this planet. But at this moment, I would not consider your appointment to leader to be one of them. Do you? Being a team leader isn't just a title you carry into battle, but a badge you wear constantly. If you are not always performing at your absolute best, then what reason do you give others to follow you? You've been burdened with a daunting responsibility, Ruby. I advise you take some time to think about how you will uphold it.
Ruby dwells on his words while walking back to the dorms. Ospen helpfully pointed out the direction. She knows her mom was the leader of her team too, and the way Dad talks about her makes it seem like she was a great leader too, always knowing what to do and how to handle things, guiding them to victory every single time by using each of their strengths and adapting to changes quickly. Maybe that's what Ruby should do too, become someone who'll be worth listening to. Once she returns to the dorms, she looks over their next classes for the week and decides to make plans and then study in advance to not disappoint in class. She likes making plans and lists. It makes things seem less stressful. Sometime later, Blake and Yang come back too. One was checking the library, the other making connections. Apparently, Yang met him coffee too, and now she wants to know what was that about the meltdown she apparently had in the courtyard, because she's not convinced it was an actual literal explosion. Meanwhile, Weiss is just about finished her tour of the grounds and sees Professor Port on the terrace. There's a good chance to talk to someone who might understand her point, that she should have been the one to lead, but Professor Port doesn't see it that way, pointing out her flaws just as easily as he pointed out her strengths earlier in class. And he's not wrong.
So the outcome did not fall in your favor. Do you really believe that acting in such a manner would cause those in power to reconsider their decision? So instead of fretting about what you don't have, savor what you do. Hone your skills, perfect every technique, and be not the best leader, but the best person you can be.
She doesn't know how in the world is she supposed to support Ruby as a leader. She ponders over it while walking, seeing Juniper returning from wherever they were, seemingly all satisfied with themselves and carrying a bunch of plushies in different shapes and sizes. How is Pyrrha okay like this, knowing her team leader isn't cut out for the job? She thinks back on initiation, the way Pyrrha was always keeping close to Jean and following his ideas without a second thought. Is that how it's supposed to go? Will supporting a weak leader and shaping them into a decent one count as doing a great job as a teammate? Kind of like leading from the sidelines? She could do that. At least in combat, Ruby knows what she's doing. Now she needs to teach her how to act with everything outside that. It would be tough, but maybe that way she'll be able to get somewhere. And maybe it would be slightly easier than she thought, seeing that Ruby was actually studying instead of playing games like she expected when she saw the light on in her monstrosity of a bunk. She can support that, yes. Starting with giving her coffee to not fall asleep while studying. The horrific amount of sugar will definitely keep her up for several more hours, all for good cause. Even if that means Weiss has to sacrifice the cup she made for herself actually, it kinda reminds her of bringing winter coffee when she was preparing for exams to apply to Atlas, insisting she do it herself even with Klein following her, and Whitley wanting to do whatever she's doing, simpler times when them three were still close enough to want bunk beds. And that's a funky story. But that's not where we'll leave, oh no! Next time we'll move it to designing the other three teachers that we only know by name and classes with them. I'm so excited. I love how they turned out so much. But for now, what do you think of restructuring I did? Keeping the original scenes from early chapters, just moving them to slightly different types so nothing is lost. All the most memorable moments are also saved, just like I did with moving John's motion sickness last episode. Plus showing that Beacon is a big place, both in architecture and population. Honestly, it was never clear to me in the show where exactly Beacon Tower is, and I've seen some reactors think that the tower is in Vale and not on school grounds, and that Ospen's office is a whole different place. So there's a little chance to clarify without diving into boring lore dumps or high beings forbid maps. And showing coffee in passing helps establish that there are a lot of students here from different years too, to not turn it into 8 people exist in the school and nobody else. We don't have to dive into every tiniest bit of their backstory, we'll leave that for the books. Here we only have to know that they exist, they have lives outside the main characters, and they have their role in helping the mains in their development. They passively exist in the background, representing the wider population of Beacon, and when they come during Volume 2, they won't just spawn in out of nowhere, we already know who they are and what connection they have with our mains. Plus some casual disability representation with Fox and his visually clear blindness. And with that, we'll leave our part 1. Part 2 will come shortly, keep an eye on it, and I'll see you on the other side.